To understand how a confrontation at an In and Out Forever changed the perspective of two men about sports rivalry, we need to return to that Tuesday night in West Hollywood, when Steph Curry discovered that sometimes the most transformative moments happen in the simplest places. A night that began as a normal family outing and would become a lesson about how humanity can exist even within the most intense rivalries. It was almost 9 o'clock at night when Steph finished his individual training at the Crypto.com arena. The gymnasium was empty, just him and a few technical assistants finishing the last shots of a session that had lasted 2 hours. Los Angeles sparkled outside through the arena windows, a city that always welcomed him with a peculiar mixture of admiration and hostility. After all, he was Steph Curry, the man who had frustrated so many Lakers' dreams in the last decade. You can perceive how certain cities carry collective memories of victories and defeats, transforming even the most neutral locations into silent emotional battlefields. "Daddy, can we stop at In and Out?" Cannon asked from the back seat of the car, his voice carrying that anxious expectation that only children can put into simple requests. At 8 years old, Cannon had developed a genuine obsession with Californian burgers, and Steph could never resist his son's requests. Isha laughed softly from the passenger seat. "You know he won't give up until he gets it, right?" Steph looked in the rear view mirror at his son, who was making that irresistible face that all children master perfectly. "All right, champ, but only because you trained well today at school." The In and Out on Beverly Boulevard was moderately busy for a Tuesday night. The characteristic aroma of grilled onions and French fries hung in the air conditioning, mixing with the familiar sound of animated conversations and the constant sizzling of fryers. It was one of those democratically Californian places where Hollywood CEOs shared space with college students, where celebrities stood in line alongside workers getting off their night shifts. Steph liked In and Out precisely for this reason. It was one of the few places where he could feel like a normal person, just a father buying hamburgers for his family. It's impossible not to feel how some environments have the magical power to make us temporarily forget who we are to the world and reconnect us with who we truly are. "Can I order an animal style?" Cannon asked as they headed to the counter, his eyes shining with the prospect of the special burger that had become his absolute favorite. "You can, but you have to finish everything," Aisha responded, lovingly running her hand through her son's hair. "And no complaining tomorrow that you have a stomachache." They placed their order without any special commotion. The attendant, a young man with an impeccably clean uniform, recognized Steph but maintained discreet professionalism, just a slightly wider smile, and a whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Curry," when he handed over the receipt. How many times in life do we need these moments of normalcy to remember that, underneath all our public personas, we are just people trying to live well and take care of those we love? Steph found a table in the corner, strategically positioned where he could see the entrance, but wouldn't be immediately visible to anyone entering. It was a habit he had developed over the years, not out of paranoia, but from experience. Public places in Los Angeles, especially during NBA season, always carried the possibility of unexpected encounters. "How was training today, Daddy?" Cannon asked while they waited for the food, swinging his little legs that didn't reach the floor. "It was good, son. I worked hard on three-point shots. You know how important it is to keep practicing, even when you think you already know how to do something well. Like me with math." "Exactly like you with math," Steph smiled, feeling that deep satisfaction that comes from seeing a child absorbing life lessons through simple analogies. Isha was checking messages on her cell phone when the order was ready. Steph got up to get the tray, navigating between tables occupied by a typical Los Angeles mix: young couples sharing French fries, families with noisy children, some college students studying while eating. Naturally, this leads us to question how public spaces can be simultaneously intimate and exposed, safe and unpredictable. It was when Steph was returning with the tray that he noticed a man a few tables ahead who seemed to be looking in his direction with an intensity that went beyond casual curiosity. Marcus Rodriguez, 35 years old, wearing a faded Lakers t-shirt and matching cap, had just finished a double shift as a mechanic at a shop in East LA. His hands still carried traces of grease that not all the soap had managed to completely remove. Marcus was eating alone, as he did 3 times a week, when he got off work late. The in and out was his mandatory stop, not out of luxury, but for convenience, and because a double-double was one of the few simple joys his budget allowed without guilt. And now Steph Curry, the man who had tormented his Lakers fan dreams for almost a decade, was less than 10 meters away, eating hamburgers with his family as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with a mixture of old anger and present opportunity. How many nights had he screamed at the television watching Steph destroy the Lakers? How many seasons of hope had been frustrated by those impossible shots that always seemed to find their target at the most crucial moments? You can perceive how sports passions accumulated over years can transform into something much bigger than basketball. They become matters of identity, pride, and unrealized dreams. Steph placed the tray on the table, distributing the burgers and French fries, completely oblivious to the emotional drama that was developing a few tables away. Cannon immediately attacked his animal style with the seriousness of a child on an important mission, while Isha organized napkins and sauces with the efficiency of an experienced mother. "Is it good, champ?" Steph asked, watching his son battle with a burger that seemed disproportionate to his small hands. "It's the best burger in the world," Cannon responded with his mouth full, causing laughter from Isha. It was a perfect moment of simple family happiness, exactly the kind of moment Steph valued most. There were no cameras, no expectations, no pressure, just a father, a mother, and a son sharing a meal and some laughs on a Tuesday night. Marcus observed all of this, and his initial anger began to mix with something more complicated. It was difficult to maintain pure hatred for someone who was simply being a normal father, taking care of his family, seeming genuinely relaxed and happy. But then Marcus remembered the 2016 season, when the Lakers were trying to rebuild, and the Warriors seemed to win everything effortlessly. He remembered 2019, when they finally had LeBron and still couldn't get anywhere close to the success that Steph made look easy. It's impossible not to feel how painful memories can resurface at the most unexpected moments, transforming casual encounters into opportunities for settling scores. Marcus finished his burger, wiped his hands on the napkin, and made a decision that would change the night for both men. He got up from the table, his heart beating faster, and began walking toward the Curry family. Steph noticed the peripheral movement and looked up, his professional athlete instincts alerting him to a possible situation. When he saw Marcus approaching with determination on his face and a Lakers shirt on his body, Steph immediately knew that his quiet family night was about to take a completely different turn. Isha also noticed the change in energy, instinctively positioning herself slightly closer to Cannon, who continued eating oblivious to the growing tension. And it was at that moment that Marcus stopped 1 meter from the table, looked directly into Steph Curry's eyes, and said the words that would transform a simple family dinner into a lesson about humanity and sports rivalry that would be remembered for a long time. The in and out continued with its normal movement around them, but at the table in the corner, time seemed to have stopped, awaiting the next words that would redefine how two men saw each other and the sport they both loved in different ways. "Steph Curry," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of a decade of accumulated frustrations. "You ruined our dynasty." The words cut through the restaurant's air like a cold blade, instantly transforming the warm atmosphere of the family dinner into something tense and uncomfortable. Cannon stopped chewing, his big eyes moving between the unknown man and his father, not completely understanding what was happening but feeling that something had changed in the air around the table. You can perceive how certain words have the power to freeze moments, transforming safe spaces into emotional battlefields in a matter of seconds. Steph carefully placed his burger back on the tray, wiped his hands on the napkin, and looked at Marcus with the same calm he used to convert decisive free throws. His eyes showed no anger or surprise, just the quick assessment that years of public experience had taught him to make when confronted by passions that went beyond the rationale. "Hi," Steph responded simply, his voice maintaining a friendly tone but clearly alert. "Are you okay?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He had mentally rehearsed this confrontation during the 15 seconds of walking to the table, imagining arguments about lost championships, wasted opportunities, frustrated fan dreams, but he hadn't prepared for kindness. Isha instinctively moved closer to Cannon, her hand finding her son's shoulder in a subtle protective gesture. She had known Steph long enough to know he wouldn't escalate the situation, but she also knew the risks of public exposure that came with her husband's fame. It's impossible not to feel how the tension of a family being publicly observed adds layers of complexity to any already delicate situation. I'm okay," Marcus responded, clearly struggling to maintain the momentum of his initial anger in the face of Steph's unexpectedly calm reaction. "It's just that, man, you guys destroyed everything we built. The Lakers were everything to this city, and you guys just dominated for years." People at nearby tables began to notice the conversation. Discreet whispers began to circulate through the restaurant. Cell phones were discreetly positioned for possible recordings, and the normal movement of the in and out acquired that peculiar quality of when something potentially dramatic is happening in public. Marcus felt the stares and, for a moment, questioned his decision. But the accumulated frustration of a decade was stronger than social embarrassment. 2016, man. That season was ours. Kobe was retiring. It was supposed to be a glorious farewell, and you guys won 73 games like it was easy. Steph nodded slowly, recognizing the genuine pain in Marcus's voice. 2016 was a special season, he said, his voice carrying respect instead of arrogance. For all of us. How many times in life does genuine passion for something we love transform into anger directed at those who prevent our dreams from coming true? Special for you guys. Marcus slightly raised his voice, his emotions finally overflowing. You don't understand what it means to grow up in East LA, work 2 shifts to buy Lakers tickets, spend your whole life waiting for another championship, and then watch you guys win everything without even breaking a sweat. Cannon looked at his father with concern, not understanding the specific words, but catching the intense emotional energy. Steph noticed his son's discomfort and made a choice that would surprise not only Marcus, but everyone who witnessed the moment. "What's your name?" Steph asked, his voice maintaining calm but gaining a sincerity that made Marcus hesitate. Marcus Rodriguez." "Marcus," Steph repeated, as if he were engraving the name in his memory. "Do you have children?" The question came so out of nowhere that Marcus blinked several times before responding. I have a daughter, Sophia. She's 7 years old. Steph looked at Cannon, who was observing everything with the intense curiosity that only children possess when adults are having important conversations they don't completely understand. Naturally, this leads us to understand how fatherhood can become a universal language that transcends rivalries and superficial differences. Marcus, Steph said, his voice gaining a beat by chew, different quality. Do you want to sit and talk? Really talk. Not about basketball, not about championships, about why this means so much to you. The invitation echoed through the space around the table like something completely unexpected. The people who were discreetly watching the confrontation leaned forward, trying to hear better. Even the in-and-out employees slowed their work pace, sensing that something unusual was happening. Marcus stood still for a moment, processing. He had arrived. They're prepared for a battle, ready to finally express years of accumulated frustration. He hadn't prepared to be invited to a conversation. Marcus looked around, noticing for the first time how many people were paying attention. I don't know if... Dad, Cannon whispered, lightly pulling Steph's shirt. Is the man sad? The innocence of the question cut through all the tension like a ray of light. Marcus looked at the child, really looked, and for the first time since approaching the table, he saw not just Steph Curry, the adversary, but Steph Curry, the father. It's impossible not to perceive how the presence of children can reveal the fundamental humanity that exists beneath all our public masks and constructed rivalries. Maybe a little bit, Steph responded to his son, but keeping his eyes on Marcus. Sometimes people get sad when things don't happen the way they expected. Marcus felt something moving in his chest. Not anger, but something more complex. Recognition, perhaps, or the sudden realization that he had approached a family during an intimate moment, and perhaps there was a better way to express what he felt. Marcus began, but stopped, struggling with emotions he hadn't expected to feel. I work 60 hours a week at a shop. The Lakers, they're my escape valve, my moment of happiness. And you guys, and we took that away from you, Steph completed, not as an accusation, but as genuine recognition of real pain. Marcus nodded, surprised to be understood instead of judged. Marcus, Steph said, gesturing to the empty chair beside the table. Seriously, sit here. Let's talk like two fathers who love basketball, not like enemies. And it was at that moment that Marcus Rodriguez, mechanic from East LA and passionate Lakers fan, had to decide whether to accept the most unexpected thing he could have imagined when he got up from his table 3 minutes before. An invitation to humanize a rivalry he had carried alone for years. The decision he would make in the next few seconds would not only change the rest of his night, but create a moment that would be shared millions of times on social media as an example of how sport, at its best, can unite instead of divide. Marcus looked at the empty chair, then at Steph, then at Cannon, who was still observing him with that innocent curiosity that only children possess. For a moment, all the noise of the in and out seemed to diminish around him. 3 minutes before, he had gotten up from his table with accumulated anger from a decade. Now, he was being invited to sit at the table of the man who had been the focus of that anger. Okay, Marcus said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. Okay, I can sit for a few minutes. You can perceive how the most transformative moments in life often begin with a simple word. Okay. When Marcus sat down, something fundamental changed in the table's dynamics. It was no longer a public confrontation. It was a conversation between real people. Steph pushed the basket of French fries toward Marcus, a small gesture, but one that formally broke the barrier between us and them. "Thank you," Marcus said, taking a fry almost by reflex. Sorry for interrupting your family's dinner." Isha smiled gently. "Don't worry about it. It happens more than you imagine." "Does Sophia also like basketball?" Steph asked, the natural transition to safer territories. Marcus nodded, and, for the first time since approaching the table, a genuine smile appeared on his face. "She's starting to play at school. 8 years old. But she's already good. Has a better shot than mine." "What position does she like?" Cannon asked, entering the conversation with the enthusiasm of a child who found another father to talk about sports with. "Point guard. Like your dad," Marcus responded, and there was something in the tone of the response that carried recognition instead of criticism. It's impossible not to feel how conversations about our children can break even the most solid barriers we build between ourselves and those we see as different. "Marcus," Steph said, leaning slightly forward, "tell me about 2016. What that season meant to you. Really?" Marcus paused, putting a French fry back in the basket. "My dad took me to my first Lakers game when I was 7 years old. Magic Johnson was still playing. He always said the Lakers were more than a team. They were the heart of Los Angeles." His voice gained a different quality, softer, loaded with memories. "He died in 2015. Cancer. And I really thought 2016 would be the year. Kobe retiring, LeBron still in Cleveland. You guys were good, but hadn't proven anything yet. It seemed like the stars were aligning." Steph nodded silently, understanding that he was hearing something much deeper than complaints about basketball. "And then you guys won 73 games, Marcus continued, his voice no longer carrying anger, but genuine sadness. "I watched every game thinking about my dad, imagining how proud he would be if we could get back to the top. And you guys were unstoppable. How many times do our sports passions carry the weight of people we've lost, dreams we've inherited, promises we've made to ourselves about honoring those who taught us to love something?" "I'm sorry for the loss of your father," Steph said, and there was a sincerity in his voice that made Marcus look directly at him for the first time since sitting down. "Thank you," Marcus responded. He would have liked you, actually. Always respected players who worked hard. "Can I tell you something?" Steph asked, and Marcus nodded. "I grew up being underestimated, too small, too weak, too unlikely. Every time someone told me I couldn't do it, I thought about my dad teaching me not to give up. When we won in 2015, when we got 73 wins in 2016, it wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about proving that hard work pays off." Marcus processed this, seeing Steph for the first time not as the adversary who ruined his dreams, but as someone who had fought for his own dreams. "I never thought about it that way," Marcus admitted. "To me, you guys always seemed, I don't know, like everything was easy." "Nothing was easy," Steph laughed softly. "Every shot I make, every game we play, carries the weight of years of people saying it wasn't possible. Naturally, this leads us to understand how different perspectives on the same event can coexist without one nullifying the validity of the other." Isha was watching the conversation with growing admiration for her husband, seeing him navigate complex emotional territory with the same skill he used to navigate defenses on the court. Cannon was dividing his attention between his burger and the adults' conversation, clearly feeling that something important was happening. "Marcus," Steph said, How many hours do you work per week? 60, sometimes 70 when there's a lot of work. And you still find time to watch all the games? It's my way of relaxing, my moment of hope, you know? For 2 hours, I can forget about bills, tiredness, and just root for something bigger. Steph nodded deeply. I understand that. And you know what else? I respect that. I respect the passion you have, even when it's directed against me. At a table a few seats ahead, a young college student was discreetly filming the conversation with her cell phone, capturing audio fragments that would become viral within hours. But neither Steph nor Marcus noticed. They were too absorbed in the discovery that each other's enemy was, in fact, just another person trying to live well and find meaning through sport. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Sure. When you guys play against the Lakers, do you think about the fans? About people like me? Steph considered the question carefully. Yes and no. During the game, I'm focused on winning. But afterward? Yes, I think. I know that for every victory of ours, there are thousands of people like you who get disappointed. And that doesn't make me happy. Even though we're rivals? Marcus, rivalry in sport is beautiful when there's respect underneath. The problem is when we forget that on the other side, there are real people with real dreams. It's impossible not to perceive how mutual humanization can transform antagonism into understanding without eliminating healthy competition. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing not just the words, but the entire experience of the last 15 minutes. I came here with anger, he said finally. Anger at you, at the Warriors, at how you guys changed everything. And now? And now? Now I'm still going to root against you guys, Marcus smiled, but I won't hate anymore. Do you understand the difference? Steph extended his hand to Marcus. I understand perfectly. And you know what? That makes everything better. Rivalry with respect is the best rivalry. When they shook hands, several people in the in and out began to applaud spontaneously. What had begun as an embarrassing confrontation had transformed into something beautiful. Two people finding common humanity through their differences. Marcus got up from the table, but this time there was no tension in his movements. Thank you, he said, for listening to me instead of just dismissing me. Thank you for approaching, Steph responded, for reminding me that behind every rivalry, there are real people with real stories. And when Marcus walked back to his table to finish his burger, he was no longer just a frustrated Lakers fan. He was Marcus Rodriguez, Sophia's father, hard-working mechanic, and now someone who had discovered that it's possible to respect who you root against. The video of that conversation would begin circulating on social media before both of them even left the restaurant. But the real impact wouldn't be measured in views or shares. It would be measured in the way two people had chosen to see each other differently, proving that even the most intense rivalries can coexist with mutual respect and human understanding. 3 hours after Steph and his family left the In-N-Out, Marcus's cell phone began vibrating incessantly. Friends, co-workers, even people he hadn't talked to in years were sending messages with the same link. A 2-minute video showing his conversation with Steph Curry that already had more than 50,000 views and was growing exponentially. You can perceive how authentic moments of humanity have a peculiar way of traveling faster than any algorithm can predict. The video had been posted by the college student who had discreetly filmed the conversation, with the caption, "This is how you transform hate into respect. Lakers fan confronts Steph Curry, and what happens next will restore your faith in humanity. Within hours, the hashtag #RespectRivalry was trending on Twitter, with thousands of people sharing their own stories about transformative encounters with sports rivals. Marcus was sitting on his worn sofa in East LA, watching himself on a small screen, still processing how a normal night had transformed into something that apparently touched hearts around the country. His daughter Sophia was beside him, impressed to see her father on strangers' phones. "Daddy, are you famous now?" she asked, her eyes shining with the admiration that only children can have for parents who do something unexpected. "No, mi amor," Marcus responded, putting his arm around his daughter. "I just learned something important today." "What?" "That it's possible to not like someone's team and still like the person. It's impossible not to feel how lessons learned by adults often become seeds of wisdom for the next generation." In the Bay Area, Steph was putting Cannon to bed when Isha showed him the viral video. They watched in silence, Steph seeing for the first time how that conversation had seemed from the outside. Two people choosing humanity instead of hostility. "You did something special today," Isha said, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. "Not just in basketball, in life." Steph nodded, but his mind was on Marcus, wondering how the man was dealing with the sudden attention, hoping the experience was being positive for him too. The comments on the video were overwhelmingly positive, but what caught Steph's attention most were the stories people were sharing. "I'm a Celtics fan, and I've always hated the Lakers. But after seeing this, I'm going to try to remember that on the other side, there are real people with real stories. My dad taught me to hate the rival team. I'm going to teach my son to respect them. I work with a guy who roots for the team I hate. Tomorrow I'm going to ask why he loves that team so much, instead of just making fun of him." How many times can a 15-minute conversation plant seeds that grow into thousands of other conversations, other understandings, other choices of respect instead of hate? A week later, Marcus received an unexpected invitation. The NBA had seen the video and wanted him and Steph to participate in a Rivalry with Respect campaign, showing how sports passion and humanity can coexist. "I don't know," Marcus told Sophia during dinner. "I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about cameras and those things. But you know about being respectful," Sophia responded with the simple wisdom that children sometimes possess. "And that's more important." The campaign was filmed at the same In-N-Out where everything had started. Steph and Marcus sitting at the same table, this time with professional cameras, but maintaining the same authenticity of the original conversation. "What would you say to other fans who feel anger similar to what you felt?" the director asked Marcus. Marcus thought for a moment, looking at Steph before responding. "I would say that it's okay to feel passion for your team. It's okay to get frustrated when they lose. But remember that on the other side, there are people who love the sport as much as you do. And that's something we can respect, even when we're rooting against them." Naturally, this leads us to understand that the best examples of human growth often come not from grand gestures, but from small choices to see others with compassion. The commercial aired during the NBA playoffs and became one of the most shared in the league's history. But for Marcus and Steph, the real success wasn't in the view numbers. Marcus began to be occasionally recognized at the shop and in the neighborhood. Instead of embarrassment, he discovered that people wanted to talk about what he had learned. Some Lakers fan colleagues who had cultivated similar hatred began to question their own attitudes. "Do you still root against the Warriors?" a friend asked. "Of course I do," Marcus laughed. "But now I root for the rivalry to be epic, not for the Warriors to fail as people." Steph for his part, discovered that the experience had changed how he viewed public confrontations. Instead of avoiding them or just tolerating them, he began to look for opportunities to humanize these interactions. 6 months later, during a Lakers versus Warriors game at the Crypto.com arena, the cameras captured Marcus in the stands, not booing or cursing, but passionately rooting for the Lakers while occasionally applauding exceptional plays by the Warriors. When Steph made a particularly impossible three-point shot, Marcus shook his head with admiration instead of anger. And when the cameras focused on them, both Steph and Marcus waved to each other, a public acknowledgement that rivalry and respect could not only coexist, but strengthen each other. How is it possible that a casual conversation in a fast food restaurant redefined how an entire generation thinks about sports competition? The answer lay in the authenticity of the original moment. Neither Steph nor Marcus had performed for cameras or calculated viral impact. They had simply chosen to see humanity where before they saw only opposition. A year later, Sofia Rodriguez began playing basketball more seriously, and Marcus discovered he was teaching her not only game fundamentals, but fundamentals of how to be a respectful competitor. "Remember what happened with Steph Curry?" he said, after a practice where Sofia had been frustrated with a loss. "That you guys became friends?" "Not exactly friends," Marcus corrected gently, "but we learned that it's possible to respect who you compete against. And that makes competition better, not worse." Steph continued his career, but frequently mentioned that night at the In-N-Out when asked about dealing with criticism or rivalries. "Healthy rivalry celebrates the opponent's excellence," he would say. "Toxic rivalry diminishes itself by trying to diminish others." And perhaps that was the true victory of that night in West Hollywood. Not that two men became friends, but that they discovered it's possible to honor sports passion without dehumanizing those who represent obstacles to our dreams. Because in the end, the best rivalries aren't about destroying the opponent. They're about elevating each other to heights that neither would reach alone. And sometimes, all it takes to discover this is a simple invitation. Want to sit and talk? After all, the most important conversations in life often happen in the most unexpected places, between people who thought they had nothing in common except loving the same sport in different ways. At the In-N-Out on Beverly Boulevard, that corner table continues receiving customers every day. But occasionally, when two people sit there and begin to talk about their differences instead of just arguing about them, something magical still happens. Because some places hold the energy of the best conversations they've ever witnessed, reminding all of us that rivalry can grow when it transforms into respect.